Entering kindergarten parents judge the worth of schools based on the college decisions of students 15 years older than their own children. Elementary school parents want to know how programs are preparing their 7-year-olds for acceptance into highly selective colleges. Teachers are challenged when they give honest assessments and grades because of the perceived impact they may have on college admissions. Happily, as I look around the room, I know that parents of older students, having matured as parents along with their children, have a deeper understanding and appreciation for who their children are and what their goals and aspirations might be. How did we get here? Perhaps our guests will help us to understand this, but there is some hope. The recent study by the Harvard Graduate School of Education called Turning the Tide, Inspiring Concern for Others and the Common Good Through College Admission, seems to be gaining some interesting support. This attempt to rehumanize the process, focusing on community service, varied and realistic assessments, and quality accomplishment, has an impressive list of endorsees, including many colleges and universities, the National Association of Independent Schools, and many independent schools. So while we can't change the past, perhaps we can learn something from it, influence the present, and improve the prospects for this process in the future. So to kick this off, I'd like to introduce Chris Miller, one of our co-directors of college counseling, and Chris will introduce our first speakers. Thank you for being here. Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Greg. On behalf of Lucier, the other co-director of college counseling, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our Graduate Dialogue. This idea literally just kind of popped into our heads last summer. Some of you may not know, but we're 12-month employees of the school, and so we're actually here working in the summertime. And one day, I don't know if you remember what it was, but we're just talking about things to do for the year, and it just kind of said, well, what if we had an all-school program? Because Lee and I love doing evening programs. This is one of the highlights of our job. So what if we had a program, for everyone to come and hear about college admission? We have that dialogue series. Maybe we should put this together. So we emailed Megan Bruno and just kind of ran the idea by her. Here we are, 8 months later. So we're very excited, and we're so excited that there was so much interest, and really look forward to having a great, engaged conversation with you all about college admissions today.
So a little bit about how it's going to work. We're going to introduce our guests. We have a couple of questions that we're going to start with and have our speakers respond to, and then we promise that we won't take all the time with our own curiosities. We will open the floor up to you, and I know that our guests, because they work with students, would love to hear the questions that are on the minds of our students in the audience. So parents, sit on your hands just for a minute to give kids one chance to get to the microphone before you. But we hope to answer everyone's questions at the end of the night and have a spirited dialogue. I'd like to begin by introducing Bill Conley, my friend on my left here. I've known Bill for nearly all the 35 years that he spent in higher education. The alphabet brought us together. I worked at Drexel University, he worked at Drew University, and we found ourselves next to each other at college fairs quite often.
As we are tonight.
We haven't changed a bit since 1984.
You look marvelous.
But in July of 2012, Bill joined Bucknell University after serving as Dean of Enrollment and Academic Services for 10 years at our own Johns Hopkins University. While at Hopkins, he had responsibility for admission, financial aid, the registrar, career services, pre-professional advising, international students and scholars, and enrollment research. At Bucknell, he oversees the enrollment management, admission, and financial aid operations. He's also served as Dean of Undergraduate Admission at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, and as I said, as Director of Admission of Drew University and Associate Director of Admission at Lafayette from 80 to 84. to his admission and enrollment management career, he taught AP American History and Economics and coached soccer, swimming, and tennis. So he's been on the high school side as well at the Del Barton School in Morristown, New Jersey. He's a graduate of Colgate, where he played tennis, and has an M.D. from Harvard, which he earned in 1980. So Bill, thank you for being here.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Our next speaker is, again, someone whose life has crossed with mine.
Absolutely.
It's interesting. Karen went to Goucher. I was director of admission in Goucher, but I can't take credit for her.
Go ahead, you can.
She currently serves as Dean of Admission at the George Washington University. Originally from Buffalo, New York, Karen has lived and worked in the Metro DC area for many years and has amassed a wide array of admission experiences at several universities, including the University of Maryland, College Park, Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, and Syracuse. See, we are an incestuous group here. She also served as Director of College Guidance at the Friends School of Baltimore, sitting in the chair that I vacated to come to Glenelg Country School. See, it's a small world. So thank you, Karen, for being here.
So, seated next to Bill is Valerie Marchand, Welsh. She is currently the Associate Dean of Admissions and has served as a valuable member of the Admissions Office at the University of Pennsylvania since 2005. In her current role, she leads a constituent engagement group with a focus on providing an exceptional and educational college search experience to students and families. Valerie also represents Penn as an admissions officer for Maryland and West Virginia, and serves on the Admissions Leadership Board. From 2012 to 2015, Valerie led the digital media team, which included oversight of the admissions website, social media, and digital communities. Prior to this position, she headed the Admissions Visit Center, welcoming thousands of students, families, and counselors to campus. Before joining the Penn admissions team, Valerie worked for 8 years in corporate finance and consulting, and previously as a resident director at Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And next to Valerie is Chris Lucier. Chris Lucier has been Vice President of Enrollment Management at the University of Delaware since July 1, 2014. He directly supervises the Undergraduate Admissions Office, Registrar's Office, Student Financial Services, and Office for Academic Enrichment, and he provides senior administrative leadership and management over all matters relating to undergraduate student recruitment, retention, and persistence to graduation. Prior to coming to the University of Delaware, Chris was the Vice President of Enrollment Management at the University of Vermont from 2007 to 2014. And from 2001 to 2007, Chris served as Senior Associate Director and then Director of Recruitment and Operations in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of Michigan. Chris began his enrollment management career in March 2001 after serving in the U.S. Army as an armor officer for 21 years. His last assignment was as the chair of the Army Officer Education Program, Army ROTC, at the University of Michigan from May 1997 to March 2001. He retired from the U.S. Army in March 2001 as a lieutenant colonel. Chris holds a BS in Renewable Natural Resources from the University of Arizona and a Master's in Public Administration from Western Kentucky University. He is also a graduate of the Army's Command and General Staff College. So, with that, I have the pleasure of asking the first question. And this is about a term that you may have heard. It gets tossed around the media a lot, and it relates to the idea of institutional priorities. So, this is to each member of the panel. What are some of your institution's current enrollment policies and priorities, and how have they changed in the past 10 years? Can you project what they might be 10 years from now, and how this might impact students from independent schools in particular? Bill, want to take a stab at that?
Not really. It's a hard question to give a brief answer to, but I will. As Lee suggests, I've been at Bucknell. This is my 4th year, and I would say that what we're looking at, Bucknell is an undergraduate university. We have 3,400 students, and we have a College of Engineering, a College of Arts and Sciences, and a School of Management to become a College of Management. So we are kind of an interesting breed. Some people think of us as a liberal arts college, and larger university. With that said, one of the things that I think we need to do at Bucknell, and this is a commitment from the top down, is we are a relatively traditional university in terms of our draw. Many students from the Northeast. Our diversity numbers are not where they should be, given where the country is today, and given your comment, we're always looking 5, 10 years down the road. So what do I think will change at Bucknell? Not our curriculum. We're doing what we want to be doing, what we think we're really good at. But what we do expect to change is the composition of our students. Diversity-wise in race, ethnicity, geographics. So how does it relate to an independent school? What we find is that we think we just skimmed the surface of students who are traditionally interested in Bucknell. So instead of saying, oh, the Northeast is shrinking, why are we spending any time here? I actually think, well, I grew up in New Jersey, I love the Northeast. But there are more students here than any other part of the country, save maybe California. And we haven't reached all of those students over the last 100 years. So that's our goal, is to reach more students in more geographic areas, but especially in our backyard. So you will see us again at Glenelg.
At the University of Pennsylvania, we are about 10,000 undergraduate students, a research institution, and we enroll for 4 distinct undergraduate schools and 9 programs. So, through the 10 years that I've been in the undergraduate admissions office now and looking forward, I think we continue to help students and families understand the opportunities and what that means to be on a campus with 4 undergraduate schools and an education really within the heart of a liberal arts education. We continue to educate people across the nation and the world about the University of Pennsylvania. Here in the Mid-Atlantic region on the East Coast, we're very well known, but if you go out a little bit farther, many people think we're a state school, aren't as familiar with our brand. So we're engaged now in the admissions office in a branding project with a Penn alum, and we're working on really helping for folks to understand what it means to have a Wharton business degree with a liberal arts education at Penn, what it means to be in the College of Arts and Sciences with a liberal arts foundation, and the flexibility to take classes in an engineering school, in the nursing school, even if nursing isn't your primary academic endeavor. And our programs really combine those schools. For example, one of our newest programs is the Viper program, where students are enrolled in the College of Arts and Sciences and in the School of Engineering doing research on energy. One of our newest, we're just always looking to innovate and create programs like this that help prepare students for future careers. So we're really looking to continue that conversation and that branding for our institution.
So since you have me up here, now I'm going to go off script. Sorry about that. I think, if I can, I think at the core of what Chris's question is, and we actually talked about this at dinner, is the admissions process, the driver of the admissions process for every institution in the United States is driven off of that institution's mission, its traditions, its values, the impact that it wants to make in its community, in the broader community around the world. And there's a lot of nuances in terms of how do we look at that. And all the institutions are evolving, as are states are evolving, if you're a public institution, as your region is evolving, as all of us are Northeastern schools, as the world is evolving, as the challenges that face the world are changing. All of our institutions are evolving with that, and what has to drive the process of the type of students that we bring into our classrooms to work with our faculty, to learn from our faculty, and then go out and all of us, I think the bottom line is we want to have impact. We want to help young men and women have an opportunity to make a difference in their world, however they decide that to be in their community. So if you don't mind, I think that's part of this. And so when you look at institutions, and when we talk later on about admissions processes and selective institutions, and why was this student admitted, this one wasn't, you have to understand that there's a bigger concept. We're trying to build a community of students. We're trying to build a community of learners to be part of our university. So that's what I do. So as a public university for the state flagship for the state of Delaware, clearly our first and foremost obligation is for our state. It's to educate the students of our state, to provide access and opportunity for our students of our state. What's different about the University of Delaware than many other public institutions is that 2/3 of our enrollment are out-of-state students. Again, in that process, and a lot of what Bill talked about, there's a lot of similarities. We are predominantly a northeastern school. We want to continue to diversify our student body. The students today, the chance that the students, and you have a number of students from around the world here at Glenelg, which is awesome, they're going to be, the world is truly shrinking. So we are seeking to build greater international diversity in our university so that students have an opportunity to go to class, be in a student group, live in a residence hall with students from around the world. We want to have students from California, from Washington, from Idaho, from Texas. We want that in our classroom. We want to build greater diversity in terms of the communities in the Northeast where our students come from, because the best learning, and many of you are in business, etc., you put a team together and say, solve a problem, and if everyone is the same, they have the same background, the same experiences, etc., that led them to that point, you're going to come up with one solution, because everyone's thinking the same. Versus if you put a team together, and people have come from different backgrounds, different experiences, etc., and you ask them to solve a problem, or think about things, or discuss big ideas, you're going to enrich the conversation. And that's what we're trying to do in our classrooms at Michigan. Well, I can tell you, it was the same in Michigan and Vermont, too. At Delaware, and I'm probably consistent with all of our panels.
Like my colleagues have mentioned at the George Washington University, it's important to us to have as diverse and accomplished a student body as is possible. And so, as we think about how our enrollment will grow, I think we want to continue to make sure that we're casting as wide a net as is possible to ensure that students for whom GW is a great fit will be able to consider us. We are somewhat a little unique amongst this group. We are urban, like Penn. We are right in the Foggy Bottom neighborhood of GW. We are 2 blocks from the White House, a block from the State Department, from the World Bank, and our proximity to those institutions really informs how our students learn. And so for us, as we think about how we will grow and recruit students to our 6 undergraduate schools, it really is about making sure that we are attracting kind of into our net students for whom that pretty distinct experience will be a great fit. Chris asked also about what we expect our enrollment goals and priorities to look like in the future. And I was sitting here thinking, it's really hard to know. As I think about who we are today as an institution, I think anyone you meet from our community would be hard-pressed to say that we would, if you asked them 10 years ago, would be hard-pressed to say we would look how we look right now. I think as institutions, we grow and develop in response to, as Chris was saying, the needs of our community and the needs of the world. And so, at GW, 5 years ago, it became important to us to expand opportunities for students interested in the sciences and engineering. And so we started to build a beautiful new science and engineering hall, And our enrollment priority at that point became to encourage into our inquiry pool more students interested in STEM areas. We could not have predicted that, but we had to respond to that scenario when it presented itself. Just last August, we merged with the Corcoran College of Art and Design, and we have enhanced opportunities for students interested in those areas. And so I think the best organizations are nimble and respond to kind of the needs of the community and the world at a particular point.
So Bill, one of the things that you said was we're not changing our curriculum, but the world is changing. How are your institutions responding to, you know, the thing that you hear all the time, that the majority of careers that these kids will spend their lives in don't exist yet? How nimble is a good word, but how
Well,
are you?
yeah, thanks for let me clarify that what we're suggesting, even though Karen's good, excellent comments about you can't look at a crystal ball and get a clear reading, but we're basically not going to go to a curriculum du jour and say, oh my gosh, this looks like the hot major, let's go out and recruit a faculty. We are a tenured-based faculty. We don't do adjuncts, etc. So moving, even if nimbly, to an area because it seems like the hot area, that's a lot of money that is invested in. What happens in 5 years? It's not as hot as we thought it was, and now you have 6 tenured faculty who are teaching 3 kids. You know, bad metrics. So what I really was talking about is we are going to be pretty traditional in brick and mortar. It's a residential college. Our students are doing MOOCs. They are doing flipped classrooms. So part of it is that the pedagogy has to change. But frankly, I think civil engineers, there's going to be civil engineers in 30 years, and there's going to be in 40 years. How they do civil engineering, my dad was a civil engineer working for the company that did slide rules, right? But he kept doing, yeah, they didn't even react, Bill. Slide rules, playoffs. So we stay traditional, but understand that the application and the teaching of that traditional curriculum will change, and our students will be, you know, adaptable. But that's just to say we're not going to see kind of the flavor of the month in our curriculum. I just don't see it happening.
I guess I would say the beauty of the liberal arts experience, and I think that's what you'll find on all of our campuses, is that it prepares you for whatever direction your life will take. It helps you develop skills that will serve you well, whether you are a civil engineer or a college counselor or a college admissions officer or a chef. I don't know why food is on my mind, but and so, you know, you develop skills that will see you through the changes that will inevitably come when you make those career changes. And I think that's the beauty of the college experience. You're exposed to lots of different things. You develop critical thinking skills. Again, that will serve you well no matter what you do. And so while you know, the outer shell of the college experience may change, I think the core, the fundamental nature of what those 4 or 5 years will do, I think, is to prepare you to be a lifetime learner.
One of my favorite books about, and this is again showing my age, one of my favorite books about the college admission process is Playing the Selective College Admission Game by Richard Mall, who is the he was Dean of Admission at Vassar and at Bowdoin, and he made the distinction in Playing the Selective College Admission Game about being a well-rounded student and colleges seeking to build a well-rounded community. Can you guys address that and how that idea plays in your deliberations about individual candidates? Valerie, you want to start?
Yeah, I think we are all, as we're reviewing applications and students and getting to know you through your, not just through your transcript, that's such such a small part of it, but it's through who you are as students, what you're involved in. We are looking to see what kind of community member you would be on our campus as well. So, you know, how much do you know about our institutions? And have you done enough research about the college that you're applying to be able to speak to how you hope to have an impact on that campus? What you've been doing in high school, and how you can continue that perhaps on the campus that you're looking at. So, you know, we've talked about you know, teams and having different talents, and that's what we're looking at too. It's you know, bringing different voices from across the world to our campuses, so that you have a really rich learning experience in the classroom. I think students learn so much from each other. In the residence halls where you're living, on the sports field, in your labs, you know, in the dining halls, that learning is constantly happening.
When colleges and universities are selecting 3%, 5% of applications, you have to understand that most of those applications from an academic preparation perspective are all extremely strong. By and large, the applicant pool are students who have challenged the curriculum that they were afforded. They've done very well in the classroom. They've done well on a standardized test. They've been involved. Hopefully they've shown a level of passion or you know, any number of things. They've started businesses, etc. So how do you make that decision? You go back to, and I think all of us would be able to give any number of situations that when we're reading an application, we've said, I can see this student at my campus. I can see this student is the next editor of our school newspaper. I can see this student is the next president of our Native American Association. I can see this student leading a campus protest against whatever that they feel is important.
So did I, no.
But that's, in the end, and you're looking against students who are all they can be, the nature of selective admissions is that you know, there's many students who can be academically successful at your institution. That's not the point. It's how do they fit into your university, going back to what is the essence of your university, and how are you trying to prepare, how are you trying to engage as a student and as a broader university community, and again, prepare these students to go out and make an impact in communities, states, and the world.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of myths that surround college admissions, and I would say, you know, and Dick Rawls, you know, was one of the great admissions thinkers. But actually, I don't buy the well-rounded student routine, because it suggests you have to be all things. And there's a wonderful quote I read once: "The world would be a very quiet place if only the birds who sang best sang." You know, by and large, our freshman class is made up of students who aren't all well-rounded. They're kind of angular. They each bring something. And so I think the myth that you have to have hit each of these buttons, or at least 5 of the 6 buttons, or you're not going to get in, it's absurd. So what I say is, you know, be your genuine, most authentic self. Speak in your voice on your essay. And it's so true that is what singing we hear. So we are looking for a well-rounded class that everybody feels psyched about. But not every individual has to reflect that, you know, broad profile. Thank God, that's how I got involved.
So when thinking about that, Bill, so in going into the college search process, is there ever a way that you or any of you advise your staff on what here's what we want this year, or is it just kind of, we'll just kind of see as we go and see how this starts to take shape?
Well, one of the things we do is we always have, even if we have the most veteran staff, that everybody's been there for the last 5 years, and you're like, oh. But every year, we do a calibration. And we take, 6 applicants, and everybody reads them. And we have certain rating systems, and everybody does their thing. And you think, if you've been together for 6 years, all 6 say admit, on this one, 5 say wait list on the other. It's all over there. And so we don't try to drive to conformity. What we're saying is, so tell me more about why on a 1 to 5 academic index, 5 being the best, you 3 have them with a 3, and one has 4 or 5. So let's talk about that. So I think, to that, Chris, that's what we try to do each year, is to say it's a new year. And we all have our biases. Let's see how they play out in this kind of calibration study. And I remember doing, when I was a rookie admission officer at Lafayette College, and I'm reading an application, we're in committee, and I said, big whoop. Eagle Scout? Who cares? Well, yeah, I never went to scouting, right? Well, Brad Quinn, who's down with the college, he almost punched me. He was an Eagle Scout. And so now I am like the total Eagle Scout, advocate. But so that literally happens.
I will also add that when we're looking at applications, we are not looking at an application beside other students or beside other schools. It is your application. It is your story. You own it. And when we open it and when we read it, we are all about getting to know you and the challenges that you have faced, how you have challenged yourself in the classroom, your family story, all of those things. Each application is looked at on their own merits.
And I guess I would also add, it's why when you are charting your path in high school, it's important for you to chart your path. You listen to NPR and you read, the Wall Street Journal, and there are so many articles about colleges looking for A, B, C, D, E, F. We want that A, B, C, D that you did. There's not a silver bullet. There's not a golden ticket. And I think students who, I always say to students that if you do high school well, college takes care of itself. Because you've taken courses that you like, most often, that you've done well in. You challenged yourself in the ways that are appropriate for your aspirations and your talents. You've gotten involved in things that really interest you, and you've continued the things that you loved, and you stopped doing the things that you didn't love, but you've learned about that along the way. And so if you think about high school as an opportunity to kind of get your hands wet in all of those areas, by the time you get to the college process, you can talk about what you like. You can talk about what you don't like. You can articulate why a particular school might be a great fit for you. And that's the kind of authenticity and transparency that resounds with us, and that helps, that contributes to a successful admissions outcome. Sorry, I just can't seem to stay away from the mic.
So, can we have a show of hands? How many are primary school, I hope the primary school students aren't here, they should be in bed, but how many are primary or lower school parents? Okay, a few. Middle school students and parents? Okay. And upper school students and parents?
It's like the whole upper school action with us here.
Thanks, guys. You're reading the daily announcements. I appreciate that. So, given that there are some primary and lower school parents in the audience, is it ever too early to start the college search process and to seek guidance from our school counselors? We're a pre-K. We are a 2-year-old through, I mean, it feels like cradle to grave. Right?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah.
We're getting
We
there.
are getting there. their kids, or with the staff on guidance. What do you think?
I think the first question as to how has our admissions process changed over 10 years, and where is it going to be in the next 10 years, and none of us really know, I think begins to provide a framework for the answer to the question. What will our institutions be oriented? What will be our goals? How will we have changed our pedagogy? How will we have changed where we want to make an impact as institutions in our state, region, in the world? I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, what will be the admissions process? Greg talked about the Harvard study on turning the tide that talked about how should we, as colleges and universities and selected colleges and universities, relook at the admissions process. A number of colleges and universities are becoming test optional. George Washington is. We announced it this week for our Delaware residents, and we're going to be test optional. So what will be the importance of tests in 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 7 years from now? There may be new admissions processes. Will we be doing all Skype interviews then? There's a number of schools now that are actually doing Skype interviews, both for international and domestic students. So will we get to know you literally by getting to know you? I don't know. So if you're dwelling on what is the admissions process for the entering class of fall of 2016, my guess, I can easily say it's going to be a little bit different for fall of 17. It's certainly going to be different for the fall of 20, 21, and 25. So if you're agonizing over it now, you're agonizing on things that are going to be different.
I would say if we raise 2 kids, we're still raising. You never finish raising kids, right? They're 28 and 25, and you're still the kids. But I think our abiding, my wife is in education too, our abiding notion was, yes, we expected them to go to college, but never for a moment did we know which college. And as they were going through, we always made decisions on the here and now. What is in the best interest of Nicholas for his type of learning, for what he wants to do, but it could be very different for Anna. So I think it works out, and I think what's really important, wherever you are on the continuum, to be really thoughtful about the here and now. That's the most important investment of your time and concern, not projecting, that if we don't do this, if they don't take this AP, this is going to happen. One of my favorite lines is somebody who said, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, what a Merry Christmas we'd all have. And I think there's too many who go through life, well, if our child had only gone to the public school, they would have been number 5 in the class and would have gotten into Penn. But we sent them to this really hard school, so they only got into Swarthmore. So I think take the short view with your children, because that's going to inform the long view.
I think that's the conversation in admissions offices, and will continue to be, is the health of students. And parents need to be very engaged in that conversation too. We read applications and quite frankly, we're completely humbled by the lives of students, have no idea how students balance what they do. And it's frankly just too much sometimes. So we see that. We want students to have very rich lives, to be engaged in what they're doing, but we want you to have balance. So I think that parents really need to take a step back and think about that. The health of your children, and the whole process, and what's, as you were saying, what's the best fit? If you were taught, I have very young children in elementary school. You talk to some of my colleagues in admissions, and very similar, knowing what we know in the admissions landscape, we don't have very specific goals for them. We want them to do their best. We want them to be the best that they can be in their world and go to a place where they can continue to thrive and grow.
I want to respond to your question very directly because I think, yes, there are some grades at which it is too early to focus on this process. I think, elementary and middle school students, should know college exists and that's their aspiration. But I don't think their lives or their experiences or their coursework should be considered through the lens of what is preparing them for a particular school. Because I don't have children, I know everything about raising children. And so I talk to all my friends about, when you are, in a particular city, and if there is a college there, it doesn't hurt to drive through the campus. But in my opinion, quite honestly, for a middle school student, that should be the extent of how they think about college. I mean, I think high school is time enough to start thinking about how to create an experience there that prepares them for the next step. This is kind of a pet peeve because I think it takes the focus away from, as you were saying, the now. You don't get to be 11 again after you turn 12, right? And so, to be so programmed to think about the next step just really robs young people of, what is special about being at that point in their lives.
I want to thank you all because you freed up a lot of time on my weekend just now by me taking my daughter everywhere under the sun to get her involved in something. So I'm going to go home and we're going to explain this. We'll cut back on weekends.
Yeah.
Chill. No more swimming in tennis. Cut back on this stuff. But I do appreciate that you got me thinking now about just the choices we make as parents now, versus the choices we might make as a parent later. And I feel like, when I make a decision to get me involved in something, or just to make this and have her come here, I do it because I think it's for a particular experience I want her to have, and I want her to grow in a certain way. And I wonder then, Valerie, you mentioned this a little while ago, talking about not comparing student to student or comparing school to school, but does it ever come up where, I need to be worried about, her being at Glenelg Country School and the experience she's getting here versus if maybe I want to have her in a different school, public or independent, and how that might influence what happens to her later on in the college admission process, or just in life in general.
Well, one thing, you can't beat convenience. But, you work here, and I think there's something that, I remember when our kids were preschool age and we moved to Cleveland, and we were looking at preschool, and but there's a preschool right across the street. Maybe, and I remember calling my sister, because she had done this in Manhattan, so there's several preschools, and there's one who's right across the street. She goes, "It's right across the street? What are you making it so complicated for?" So I think, I think we've got to be instinctual, and some of those commonsensical things. And it's a strong communication to our children. That's something, well, Dad, why are we going to Carroll Nursery School? Son, it's right across the street. And it really helps them understand, like, wow, that's pretty practical. And I think one of the things I mentioned at dinner, I really feel like this notion that we're pressurizing kids today. And frankly, sometimes I feel like they're saying it's our fault in college admissions that we've created these high stakes game. And I'm like, folks, we inherit the wind. We didn't do this. It's just what's happening. So we're guaranteed we will partner with you. When we look at an application, just as Valerie said, it is about you. And you're going to send your applications to an office of admission, not an office of rejection. And they start with, where are the reasons to admit this student? So I think if you really understand that we're partnering with you, and even at Stanford where they, admit 6% of the class, And it does seem like, well, those are the stakes if you apply to Stanford. But don't think for a moment that Stanford is purposely trying to keep children up at night studying or going to 5 activities on Saturday. You're making those choices. I mean, so that, got that off my chest. We are making those choices.
Right.
I do. No, I just, we really want to partner, and we can guarantee you're going to find a place. Your child will find a place that he or she will thrive in. Absolutely.
So, should we talk a little more about everyone's favorite topic?
Yeah, if you're thinking what I'm thinking,
I'm thinking about standardized testing.
yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
love it. We love it. And you do too. And you guys love it so much that you're not using it. And
Valerie and I said we're going to go off and have a cup of coffee now and let these guys test optional tests talk about it.
because we want to talk about the value of standardized testing and what standardized testing means and what it doesn't mean, and what do you think about the change in the test and the kind of sea change that the College Board has just announced in what ACT has been doing, and I think we also need to talk about advanced placement and how you value that, not only the curriculum of advanced placement, but the score on a test that a student may present to you as part of their application. There's a lot there.
Yeah, I was going to just say that. That was one question, really? It's like,
We could have done a whole thing just on
get your
testing.
segment.
Greg, close the doors. We're here all night.
So, well, let's start with, what was the process in deciding to allow students to submit or not submit standardized tests?
So our faculty senate just voted on Monday to make the test optional for Delawareans, where we have the biggest commitment to access and opportunity, and we're going to consider broadening it out to out-of-state students over the next several years as we progress onward. And I think there was one of the members of the faculty committee that did the research that showed that GPA was the best predictor of graduation at the University of Delaware for Delawareans. There was no additional value added by the SAT score. 0. No additional value. So the question was, if we know, and we hear these from our Delaware counselors, and my guess is that, and having talked to counselors in Maryland, et cetera, about other, if we consider going out of state, was there are students that are sometimes intimidated or view the fact that they didn't get the average SAT or that they didn't get a high SAT as a reason not to apply at an institution like GW where it would be a great fit. They would, wow, they're going to make an impact. Wow, I wish that student had applied. So we know that. But the chair of the math department had gone in there skeptical himself. But as he did the research, and then he started thinking, actually his daughter's a junior. So he's going around to colleges and going to colleges that are test optional and listening to the conversation. He thought about it and said, there's 4 years of work. 4 years of engaging a curriculum, of doing homework, about preparing for tests, studying after school, going after class to talk to teachers, etc. That indicate a level of grit, determination, persistence, etc. So in his mind, actually it makes a lot of sense that GPA is the best predictor of persistence to graduation, not how you did on one day, if you take it more than once, 2 days, 3 days, as opposed to that one time that you were able to prepare. And in a lot of cases, one of the most compelling things, we had an undergraduate student on the faculty senate who came from a school where a lot of students did test prep, etc. And he said, I know students who got test prep, they tested it 3 times, etc. They got high GPAs, they went off to great schools, and now they're on academic probation. Because it really wasn't an indicator of how well they were prepared to perform at that institution. They just prepared well for one day. So that was behind our decision.
experience was pretty similar. Our President Knapp, actually participated in President Obama's Education Summit. I guess it was about 2.5 years ago now, and came back to campus really engaged, really excited to facilitate a conversation about access. So he convened a task force to look at access and success broadly defined at GW. One of the task forces, one of the groups, started to look at standardized test scores and their predictability. Skipping over lots of details, what we really determined after doing research on how our students persisted and looking at the national research is exactly what Chris mentioned, that for us and our process, the biggest predictor of success at GW was performance, rigor, high school experience. And so we started to kind of engage in a conversation about, you know, if we were asking for this test and we realized that its predictability for us was limited, you know, why were we asking for it? That kind of led to a conversation about wanting to make sure that students who, again, for whom GW would be a great fit, but perhaps their scores did not match their performance in high school, what was the impact on the fact that we were requiring scores? And so, you know, this has been a really great experience for us. We announced that we were going test optional in August. Our applications are up 28% this first year of test optional. And what we're seeing as we are going through the process is that there are many students who have incredibly compelling stories, who've done really well, who found their way to us because, you know, we said you have the choice about determining whether your scores reflect your ability. And so it's really exciting.
But, okay.
No
So, okay, so that's you now. Okay, but I mean, known you for a little while.
Don't tell any stories.
No stories. No stories. But you used to work at an institution that
I've worked at several institutions.
right? But some that would receive, let's just say, obscene scores, you know, in terms of students, the quality of the students who applied there. Some of you work at schools like that now that get that receive applications for students with the highest test scores, and so. But if those are the ones that are getting in to the best schools, I mean, isn't that reason enough to devote plenty of attention to making sure that the scores are the highest possible to get you to the best schools?
Please. I don't think that scores are never what's going to get a student into a school. It's actually a small part of the whole piece of review. I think it's less important than you think, but maybe more important than you want it to be. You know, it plays both roles. I'd say for the most important thing, academically, scores is going to be the student's high school transcript. You know, your grades and that you're taking challenging classes and that you're doing well in them. We often use testing if there's a weakness in a specific area on the transcript, then we will look at testing to say, well, let's see if this is consistent or maybe this is just you know, something else, just to put everything into context. So it does help in that way, but you know, testing will never, for us, you know, it never admits a student and it never denies a student.
Yeah, and I think we're, the U.S., we're the most democratic country in the world in terms of access to higher education. You know, we think these SATs and ACTs are high stakes, gatekeeping testing. Well, you know, grow up in Germany or France or China, where, you know, what you do when you're 11 years old on a single exam is going to determine whether you go off into a voc tech track or you go off to a university track. And even if you're off on the university track, if you don't nail, you know, the baccalaureate, you know, all that work in this academic track would have been for naught. So I think we're kind of weenies in the sense that SATs are not the great separator. You know, the ACT is not the great separator. It is, you know, something that is not inherently good or evil. It's how it's used, and when I was at Hopkins, we participated in the book written, or I should say edited by the professor, a sociology professor at Wake Forest, which, I forgot his name, but it informed their decision to go test optional. And they were ecumenical. They reached out and said, could you do some research? Well, we concluded our research was, unlike Delaware, yes, the single best predictor, the single best is the high school GPA. But if in combination, at least at Hopkins, maybe because of the engineering and maybe because of the science, that you throw in standardized testing, and there was a little bump in terms of predictive, so our view was, hey, it does show something, and if we're in a very difficult, should we take student A or student B, and the testing looks like, it would have, not because we want to report it to the U.S. News and World Report, let's bank that 1600 SAT instead of the 1550 or the 1420. No, we're going to go with that combination. So I really think when you, as a student, are taking the test, take it because there are still more schools that require standardized tests than are optional. And then you can decide whether, when you're applying, if it's test optional, whether you want to submit or not submit. But please, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, really, I'm not a good test taker. So my best thing to do is stay away from those tests, apply to schools that are test optional or don't require it, take them and trust us.
I think what often gets overlooked in these conversations is that on all of our campuses, and on many campuses, there are students with perfect scores who are not admitted. And there are students with modest scores, shall we say, but who have really distinguished themselves in their academic community, who have great success and are admitted to lots of different schools. And so, as Bill very eloquently said, it is part of the equation for lots of institutions, and it is what it is. It is one part of many, one puzzle piece of many that gets evaluated as we are looking to create a total picture of who you are.
Lee, you asked about the revised SAT. I'm personally glad that the SAT has been revised in that they're orienting it more on the knowledge that students need in college, as opposed to knowledge that, quite honestly, and vocabulary words that no one ever used, and, everyone's laughing, yeah.
I love the analogy section.
I use plethora all the time.
But do you use it correctly?
Yeah, right.
But I use plethora a lot. And having students read more great works that have kind of defined, the world and our nation, etc. And, I just find that there's a more practical orientation towards the SAT and what it's trying to assess and now than what has been in the past. I don't, we all don't know kind of how do you compare that old score to this score? We're all waiting for the first administration, and then 3 months later to get what they call the comparisons and concordance tables, and I didn't get that word right though. No, sorry.
I just
It's a
appreciate
big
the
plane.
return to the 1600 scale.
Yeah.
Because it makes me feel not so old.
That's
But
right.
I'm on a different scale than all the students I work with.
I have to editorialize just for a moment here, and I've been out of college admissions for a long time, 21 years now.
This side of it.
That side of it, right. I started my career on the college and university side in an admission office, and it's been a long time. And I want to thank you because it's clear that our students are in good hands, that you are thoughtful, that you are open-minded, that you are thorough, that you are making decisions that are research-based and human. And because of what you read in the media, and because we can get cynical about this process. You got 47,000 applications and you're taking 1,500 of them. It must be arbitrary. It must be random. And I know that it's not, and I've always known that it's not, but it's so lovely to hear it, even though I do this every day. It's so just rewarding to hear that you guys are in good hands, that you're going to be read for who you are, and not be compared to some ideal. So anyway, I digress. Have we talked enough? Should we allow our audience to get in on this?
I think we should.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So there's a microphone here in the middle, and the brave person, the first brave person, will come
First
to
brave
that.
student, right? First brave
The
student.
first brave student.
We would love the first question to be from a student. And say your name and what grade you're in.
I'm Howard Ye, and I'm a freshman. So I want to ask a question about the University of Pennsylvania, the parts of the energy parts. You said you guys have the research on the energy. Can I hear more about that?
I think that I'd be happy to talk to you more in detail about some of the programs and energy research. And research is happening in absolutely every single space of Penn. But I can talk to you more specifically about the program. Maybe not in this environment.
Okay.
I'm sure everybody's interested in that one.
Yeah, I believe that this will change the world. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we're on a roll. Yeah, we're on a roll.
Okay, so I know we talked a lot about the standard. Oh wait, first of all, I'm April.
And I'm in grade.
Oh, okay. I'm April. I'm a sophomore. So we talked a lot about the standardized tests. This is specifically for the universities and schools that have optional testing. Do you look at an application differently if the school, or if an applicant chooses not to submit their test scores?
Great
It's a
question.
great question.
We don't. We look at testing at GW as an optional credential. So in the same way that we look at an interview as being optional. So, for students who have that piece of credential, it adds another dimension to their consideration. But again, a student would never be penalized for not having that. And so, and all applications go through the same process. We are holistic for all students, regardless of whether or not they submit scores. And so it really is the same kind of evaluation, but with, it's the same kind of evaluation in our ways.
Yeah, and we're not there yet because we just passed it, but we did a lot of
Do it our way.
Yeah, because it's the right way, because GW didn't know. We actually did a lot of research into there's 850 schools that are test optional. Many of them are prestigious colleges and universities in the United States, et cetera, and we contacted a lot of them to understand. And right now, we will be providing equal consideration. My guidance, and it goes along with Bill's, though, most colleges and universities still require the SAT or an ACT or a standardized test score. So take the test and do the very best you can. And if you are applying to a test optional school and you think it is representative of your knowledge, reinforces your curriculum, etc., submit the test, submit the score. If you don't feel it is, then you don't have to. And again, you're going to be given equal consideration at the institution. But as Valerie said, there are times, again, where and I'm sure again with all of us, when you do have both the transcript and a test score, and there's one anomaly in a transcript, and you're rubbing your head, and often counselors address that, etc. But sometimes it helps you provide the context. Was it truly an anomaly, or is this an area that the student may not be as strong as in other areas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Carly. I'm a junior. So we're always told like extracurriculars are really important and all that. And so I wanted to ask about why they're important, whether you think that for someone who does maybe like varsity sports, would you care if they're planning on continuing that in college? Or is there a value in doing the extracurriculars without planning on continuing them in college?
Great question, and I think actually, if you Google "turning the tide," the study referenced about moving away from what appears to be a highly cognitive value in admitting students to actually we're talking about putting value on caring. You know, that students who care about others and their community, and that goes to your question about why do extracurriculars? Again, don't do it for us. Don't do it for us, do it for you. And so why is it important to us? Because, as mentioned earlier, because it says something about you and the choices, whether it's I've got to work at McDonald's because my parents expect some income. And they talk about that, and so that's just not frivolous. I mean, that's important and that's sustained, just as somebody who stayed in varsity soccer. So we do not have a value system either on which activity or how many. Actually, we have a value, not too many. You know, some have argued that the common application gives too many lines.
That it should be short.
They should be short because students feel like, oh my God, I didn't fill out that line. Right. Well, use crossing guard in 7th grade. Get that one in there, you know. But we feel like, yeah, don't put Eagle Scout. But it is really, I didn't get past web loads. But so what is really important to you is important to us. And so we value it, whatever it is, and committing to something over a long haul. So don't run out, even if you're a sophomore or a junior, and say, I've got to add one more activity next year. Do what you're doing already, even better, and with greater care and concern. And that's how we look at it.
I'd love to add to that too. One of my favorite things to think about, activities. So we can think about your activities, and what am I going to do, and how am I going to distinguish myself. But I'd like to think about it instead of listed activities, which is how the common application you list it. It's how I spend my time. You know, and I would love to get to the common app and say, let's rethink how we're presenting this information.
I think that's approaches.
It's how you're spending your time.
Yeah.
Because as human beings, as individuals, we do things and we want to live rich lives, right? So you get involved in your community, you do things with teammates, you might do things with community service, whatever, with community service, whatever that means. There's no, like as we said before, there are no check boxes specifically. It's just whatever you feel passionate about, how you want to get involved in your life. And we do the same as adults, post-high school, post-college. It helps us have meaningful lives.
I think this was a good example of going back to, will the admissions process change? I mean, we were just talking about it, and there is talk about the Common App, because, as you heard, I entered admissions in 2001, and I've seen, with the Common App, is almost, again, the list. I've got to fill in every block, and so there's the implication that there is you've got to do a sport, you've got to play an instrument, you've got to do community service, you have to be on a school club, you have to be on student government, and you go down this thing, and we probably all actually added up the hours that supposedly, going back to, that the students supposedly have done that, and they're in class, and it's like, they're adding time. I want this student in my school. They're adding time to the day. This is amazing. But I think it's a great example of, we're gonna relook at that, and I think that the point about how do you spend your time? How do you prioritize your day? What's important to you? probably be honest with you. Wow, that would help us see you in the application.
I'm gonna write a comment after the advisory board about that
Yeah.
suggestion.
Right.
I will credit you, no, I think it's brilliant. I
We're
think
changing the world.
It changes.
Exactly.
Well, you know, when parents are saying, I do that all the time, I say, John, what are you doing with your time?
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, we digress, sorry.
Hi, how are you? My name's Jennifer Van Kirk, and I'm a mom. And I was curious, assuming that you have a child that has rich engagement in a particular learning environment or high school environment, what are the optics of a public education versus an independent education? I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about, what you see from kids coming from those two environments. Thank you.
Well, first of all, when we read applications, and in the case of Glenelg, we know the student school, and we spend time to make sure that we know the school, and we take a look at the profile, we visit the school, etc. So there's a knowledge of understanding that I think that we get from independent schools through just our interaction with the staff, etc., whether it be in professional settings, etc., that help us understand the richness of the curriculum, the quality of the faculty, the type of engagement that students at Glenelg are going to have with faculty, with one another, that's different and often more enriching than it might be in a larger public school. It's not to diminish, again, the great faculty and great courses and great opportunities at a public school, but sometimes it's a little bit harder because of the breadth of the public opportunities, etc. So that's how I
I think that it goes back to my earlier comment about, making decisions as your child grows. And, I don't think people send their kids to independent schools simply because they can afford it. I mean, some, or maybe some do, or some send them because, Glenelg's sticker looks really good on the back of the Volvo. I don't know, but I think what we do is we don't make a value judgment. We don't say, gosh, I wish this kid would have gone to a public school instead of an independent school. What we say is they are where they are. Given their abilities, did they take the fullest advantage? So do I think there's an inherent risk in sending a child to a Glenelg? Absolutely. Because we're going to assume with whether it's AP or IB, independent school, that you have access to. And when you don't take advantage, not overextending yourself, but you have this and you've chosen, the students, that, I'm not going to stretch myself. Well, maybe that would have been acceptable at the neighborhood public school because they didn't have those opportunities. So we are going to hold you accountable for what was available to you. And frankly, if you can't get two really good recommendations from teachers, if you're in a big public school in urban Detroit, it's not likely you will be able to. But if you can't at Glenelg, we might just say, nobody really wants to write a letter. I mean, so there are some, real obvious, implications. And and I told my son when he was a sophomore, does any teacher really like you, Nick? Well, they better need two. You only need two. But make sure you have it. So I think you've assumed a certain amount of responsibility in sending your child to Glenelg, which is great academics, access to great activities, and intimate relationship with faculty. And they need to be able not to, be a brown nose, but they need to be able to show that they were able to take advantage of that.
Hi, I'm Michelle Demiusis, and I'm an upper school mom. And you spoke very cogently about the importance of standardized tests and how different schools look at it differently. I wonder if you would say something about APs. This is obviously a school with a very challenging curriculum, but actually some schools like this one have, for example, integrated humanities that are not directed towards an AP exam compared to some of my friends, for example, in public school whose kids are cranking out AP government and AP world history. I know you'll say you know Glenelg, but how does that play out? Your kid may not graduate from here with 10 APs, even though they've had an equally challenging curriculum. And I wonder if you don't happen to personally have experience with a school like Glenelg Country School, how you know. I know you get a counselor letter that says this is perhaps the most challenging curriculum, but as I look at my sophomore getting ready to apply to college, I wonder how it will play out, racking up APs versus taking the most challenging curriculum that's available to her here. Thank you.
Well, I think it is our responsibility as admissions professionals to get to know. I mean, that's our job, and Lee and Chris do a terrific job of reaching out, of communicating, of educating admissions offices. Me at Penn, I can speak specifically to about opportunities and curriculum. So, it's our responsibility to get to know schools and to get to know the curriculum and the opportunities for students and what's challenging. And that informs us as we review, a student's transcripts and what they've taken.
I guess I would also add that the benefit of an AP experience in a community that offers AP is that likely represents the most challenging or rigorous experience that a student can have. That degree of rigor, that degree of demand, that degree of challenge can be accomplished in a Glenelg without that AP moniker. And so we are open to however demand is or however challenge is presented in a particular institution. It is not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a situation where we're comparing one to another. As Bill was saying earlier, it is all about a particular context. And so, the student who has, to use your phrase, racked up 10 APs is at no greater advantage or disadvantage than someone who is in a different community and has done really well given the challenge of that particular environment.
And do you wonder sometimes about the rigor of those 5 AP classes, or 6 or 8 that they may be taking in a year? I mean, do you ever think that no human could actually do that in 1 year?
Well, and we expect, and I was an AP American history teacher in the Jurassic era. I don't know how they cover another 30 years. I was barely able to get to the Korean War, and now they've got another 40 years to carry level. Begin, okay? We don't not have to demonstrate as a senior, oh, I'm ready for college. In fact, I could graduate next week from college. That's why you're coming, okay? So that's how we take it. We just really want to see that curiosity as expressed in what you choose to do in the classroom.
I would say that the research turning the tide again points towards, when we talked about kind of the checklist mentality around activities, is that we've almost gone to a checklist mentality about, well, you have to have 5 APs, you have to have 7 APs, you have to have 3 APs, to again move to the totality of the curriculum, and again, what the student, how they've engaged themselves with their curriculum, and what are their next goals, and what are their dreams, and
As you're approaching the microphone, come on down, is that whatever you do, learn how to write well in your curriculum. Whether it's, a lab report, an English essay, and that crosses all disciplines. But that's what the most you could do for yourself as a student is to really learn to write, and that means learn to appreciate writing, because if you can write, you can get through any college in this country.
Hello, my name is Thomas Rignanzi, and I'm a junior. My question is, what are the pros and cons of applying early, either early action or early decision versus regular decision?
Yeah, that's a good question.
He's been a plant.
I can't take credit for him. He's not mine. apply once, you're either going there or you're not. But you're committed if you apply early decision. And is there an advantage in your pool of applying early decision?
So I think that I can answer this question in a couple of ways. I can give you the broad sketch of early decision and regular decision, the pros and cons in general. I'll start off by saying that I don't think it should ever be a strategy for admission, first of all, because early decision binding means you are committing to a school. And the worst thing that could happen is that you're applying early decision binding and you get in and you're not really sure if you want to be there, because that would be disastrous for you. So the pros are that you fall in love with the school and you've done your research and you put together your application and you're applying early decision. You get through the holidays without the stress of knowing where you're going to go to college. You have your financial aid package or a sense of what it should be. You know whether you've been admitted, deferred, or denied, and can kind of move on from there. Regular decision, it's a great opportunity to see where you are admitted. You have how many options you have. You can compare financial aid packages from different institutions. And then you have time to make that decision as well. You can continue to visit campuses in the spring, be invited to admit programs, get to know your incoming class at those institutions. So that's kind of I would say, the broad sketch, pros and cons, early decision, regular decision. I mean, at Penn, we admit a high percentage of students in early decision. So we commit to students who commit to us. We admit close to 50% of our class in early decision.
And Valerie hit it right on the head. I've worked in early action and now rolling institutions, and it really is about, are you prepared to commit? Are you prepared with binding admission to say, this is my dream school, this is where I want to go, and follow out with your commitment. If you're at the beginning of your senior year and there's like 4 really great choices of great places that you're really thinking about with programs, locations, whatever it is, then it's not a good choice for you. It's apply EA, apply regular, do more research, whatever it is, it really is about that binding piece. And then within that, all of us are managing these processes based off of, we're going to commit to students who commit to us. We're all managing that process with early action or rolling the same way as students who indicate early that they're interested in the University of Delaware. I want to get them, or rolling even, I want to get them their decision. I want to let them know, hey, we're interested in you too, and we want you to come to campus, and we want, those pieces.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
It's a great question.
Hi, my name is John Hung. My son's in 8th grade. One service that's going to be available to him in high school that wasn't available when I was in high school is the option of hiring a private college admissions coach. It's a growing industry. There are individuals, there are firms, there are companies that offer their services to tell your child what classes to take, what activities to get into, and what type of community service he can perform to buff up his college resume. What are your thoughts about the value of hiring a private college admissions coach?
Wow, that's a great question.
That is a great question.
And
I appreciate that.
And it's really hard to answer, but I would say this: if it's 8th grade, you don't know what the quality of your college advising. Are you at Glenelg?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think when we talk about what's too early to make a decision, I think it's too early to assume somebody would need that kind of additional support. I think people tend to go towards it because they don't like what they hear from their college advisor in terms of the types of schools that seem to be in alignment with your child's abilities, interests, etc. And it's kind of like a doctor, I'm going to get a second opinion. We sent both of our children to independent schools. And I remember, when a question would come up at the dinner table, what subject test should he take? And I'm like, let's call his counselor. That's in the tuition, and I think she has seen a lot more than even I'm on this side of the desk, and I go, 35 years experience. But she has seen many different kids in a way, and so the only problem I think I have with independent counselors, and they're not after trying to second guess your school counselor, but I'm not so sure that there's value added. I think, committing to the counselor who knows your child day in and day out is really good.
Right.
So that's my take on it.
I think Bill nailed it, but you have an extraordinary team here that understands the college process, they understand the schools, the broad breadth of schools. And I guess I would put it this way. There's a lot of independent counselors that say, well, I know I can pick up the phone and I can call the dean of admissions at so-and-so and make a difference. I'm not sure. I will tell you, if Lee or Chris call me, or probably call any of us, or our members of our team, we're calling them back. So if they want to talk to us about a student to make sure that we understand the student's file, etc., we will have that conversation with them. There are a lot of schools that won't even take a call from an independent counselor, and I guarantee that that's a fact. Just saying.
Yeah.
And I guess I would add one other thing. And so Chris talked about how Chris and Lee know the schools, the resources, but you are also part of a community in which they can get to know your student in a way that someone who sees them a couple hours, during the week, that they're not able to. And so I think that, and because they know your student to that degree, or because they can get to know your student to that degree, they can help lead your family through conversation that help you identify options that would fit your son. You said it was a son.
Yes.
Best because they know who he is.
And I'm going to jump in here too. I know a lot of independent educational consultants who are wonderful, and I know a lot of them who like to say there's a formula, and I will give you the secret formula. When you said, who will tell your child what activities to do, who will tell your child what service to do, what these folks have said is what's important to your son is what's important to them, and someone who hands them a list of extracurriculars, do this and you'll get in, there's no authenticity there. The legitimate independent consultant who will say, tell me what your interests are. Oh, okay, let me guide you toward an activity that will help you further that interest. Well, guess what? There are only 300 kids in the whole high school, and there are 2 of us. So we get
I like
to do
those
that
odds.
too.
You should too.
And your children's faculty advisors are very engaged with your kids and gearing them toward, and I can speak to that as a former parent. My daughter's a graduate, and my daughter's advisor steered her toward things that I, as her mother and an experienced college professional, would never have thought of, and were so meaningful to her and really did give her a framework in which to place her college search.
Right.
So,
Thanks for that question, though, because I'm sure a lot of people have underlined, you're right, and it's not even a cottage industry, it's much bigger than
Right.
that.
It's a mansion industry.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to make this horse bloodier, but I want to say one other thing, because I think there are some instances in which college counselors, they're reputable and they are needed. We read in our profession about students who are in high schools with classes of 6 or 7 or 800 students. I don't know that, maybe we have schools that big. I don't know. But I think in some instances, there are students in those kinds of communities who can benefit from the kind of attention that a school counselor at that kind of school is not able to provide. And so I don't want to vilify them all, because I think they can play an important role, but I think we're talking apples and pears, if you will, when you bring this kind of community into the conversation.
And
I'm done.
I want, and come up to the microphone as I, keep talking here, that there are families who engage a consultant not to replace our role, but to replace their role, the parents' role. Parents who travel a lot, who are changing jobs, who are out of town, who have a sick parent, who need the support. They don't want to burden us with asking the student every 7 minutes if they've written that essay for George Washington or Bucknell. They want someone else to have to do that. They don't want us, given everything else we need to do. So having some other adult in that child's life playing the parent role can be valuable in certain instances. So,
Hi, my name is Hi, my name is Lexi Lipkowitz, and I'm a junior, so now's the time that I'm researching what colleges I'm interested in and kind of discovering where I feel like I belong. And there's a lot of websites out there that compare me to the average scores and average abilities of people who get into those certain colleges, and I just wanted to know the percent of accuracy that is, because sometimes people are like, oh, that's totally off, don't worry. But then other people are like, yeah, that's right on the dot, you should be in that range. So I guess I'm a little worried about if that's true or if it's not, and what your opinions are about that. And I'm probably going to go sit down, but I will be listening, I promise.
So I think the question referring to, we publish for each admitted class what we call the middle 50% of the SAT or ACT range, which was really a welcome change, because in the old days it was the average SAT, and so it suggested that that average is not an average. In fact, it's you either get that and above or forget it, and it was very misleading. So now the middle 50% will say, okay, using the 1600 scale, the middle 50%, so those admitted, between the 25th percentile and the 75th, scored between a 1200 and a 1300. And so somebody with a 1450 can look at that and say, whoa, I'm in that top 25% band. So on a single, on a score, to understand it a lot more, that's suggesting, well, that score is going to be, Chris used the earlier comment, or I think Karen did, that's going to be a plus. It's not going to be the whole story, but if conversely you have a 1100 and that 25th percentile is the 1200, what it's saying is we do admit 1100 kids because they're in that pool, right? We admit 25% of the class is below 1200, but that's only 25% compared to 75% or above. So, as you look, that's all that we're trying to say is on that kind of index, that's where you would fall. And then, but what I wouldn't do is say, okay, that's, I hate the term, a safety school, because I scored a 1450 and the 75th percentile is 1300, I'm in. Exploring the academic fit of where you might be in both admissions and likely if you enroll, where that test score would put you in terms of day-to-day classroom work.
okay, you're not ours either. What, does your school have Family Connection or Navians?
Yeah,
You don't have to say. You don't have
I'm
to.
from Wisconsin, so
You heard you were going to
came
be here.
Thank you for coming tonight.
There's a cheesehead in the house.
came for a Jew convention, but okay. Anyway, we do have Navians, and
that is that that's data from your school.
Yeah.
So they're comparing your credentials to other applicants from your school who have had the same opportunities for curriculum, etc., that you have had.
So it is accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah, those are.
But
Yeah.
find a counselor in your, I don't know anything about your school and what the counseling staff is like, but find, make an appointment and find some time to sit with your counselor and try to understand what that means in terms of where you might fit and the qualities that, they'll know who those actual applicants are represented by the squares and the X's. You won't have access to the names of those people, but she can, or he maybe be able to flesh that out for you a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Before you ask your question, I just want to say, in the interest of time, all of those standing will be the last questions of the night because we're a little over now. I want to make sure that everyone can get home and the panelists can get where they need to go since they're traveling great distance. But please, no more after 9. Thank you. Okay.
Great, thank you. Good evening. My name is Chris Merton. I'm a parent of an upper school student. Can you take us behind the scenes? The application comes in the door. What happens between that and a decision? Do the applications get sorted in pile A, B, C? How does it get distributed to the admissions officer? Does more than one admission officer look at it? And finally, how much time do you spend reviewing a particular application?
Yes, no, yes.
Andy Warhol once said, everyone has 15 minutes of fame. And actually, from my experience, both at Bucknell, at Hopkins, and Case Western, that's pretty much that first read is 15 minutes. It's not speed dating, okay? It's a quality 15 minutes. But that's when we talk about being authentic and being you. So that first read, which can be done by a regional rep. So if the applicant's from Maryland and somebody is that Maryland's Bill's territory, I do the first read, and again, this is not common to every school, but that first read is pretty powerful, and they'll get a preliminary likely admit, and they'll put reasons why and acknowledge that here are a couple of concerns maybe, but I'd really like this person to be admitted, and then it might go to a second reader. But this notion that everybody's going to be read by a committee and everybody's going to be tearing hair out on each of the 47,000 applications. Chris and I don't have hair because we did that once. But no, it really is that 15 minutes of that first read, and then it goes through a secondary and sometimes a third process of looking at it in context, like for engineering by an academic area. But yeah, it's not going to be hours and hours, spent.
Think of it as Thanksgiving dinner, right? It takes a week to prepare Thanksgiving dinner and 20 minutes to devour it. So, all those 4 years that you've spent developing your resume and your transcript and writing those essays and developing relationships with teachers that turn into letters of recommendation, that's all the week-long preparation for Thanksgiving dinner.
I will add, just because Penn has, we are in the second year of a new reading model that is quite different, and we have we've had other institutions come and observe our process, where we have each application with the first review has 2 people looking at it at the same time. So there's actually a conversation initially happening.
Wow.
And so it's been great. It's been great for our office. It's been great for our teams. There's great professional development that happens as well. You're not in isolation with your own thoughts about an application, but you're really able to have a brief conversation about what you're seeing, and then together we'll make a recommendation for the application's next steps. And that generally does involve a second and a third view of the application.
Hi, my name is Arthur Nissen. I'm a sophomore here at Glenelg Country School. You mentioned the importance of GPA. How do you distinguish between weighted GPA and unweighted GPA?
Do you calculate your own GPA when you see a transcript, or do you take the GPA that's printed there?
we take what you provide to us and we consider it as you report it. And so if it is a weighted GPA, we look at it in that manner. I guess the thing the thing about GPA, probably for all of us, but maybe I should deign to speak for all of us, is that that's just the starting point, right? And so that's a number that is a cumulative numeric representation of what you've done up through the end of your junior year, but all of our admissions committees then kind of peel that number back to look at how it came to be. You know, the courses, the grades, that all kind of fed into the GPA. And so, you know, if your school offers a weighted, we're happy to take that. But again, that's just kind of the first step for us as we're considering the profile.
Does anybody recompute?
We do.
You do.
We recalculate. And actually, when I was at Hopkins, don't tell anybody, but throughout freshman year grades, first year grades, we felt like their coursework was not, you know, college prep quite yet, and there's a whole lot of other things going on, particularly for guys somehow. Ninth grade, not one of our greatest moments. At least it wasn't for me.
Not for you, Arthur, though. We are sure you had a great ninth grade year.
Yes, he did.
Hello, my name is David Wade. I'm an English teacher here at GCS, and I'm also an Eagle Scout. I've always prided myself on my ability to teach students how to write award-winning college essays. And I've also kind of prided myself on writing award-winning letters of recommendation. And I was hoping you could tell us a bit more specifically, beyond authenticity, what you're looking for from letters of recommendation or college essays. Thanks.
I think that the application tells a story, and we've said that kind of before. So the essay, I think, should continue that story. You know, it should be part of the story of the student. We like to see connections. So whether it's, you know, things that student is doing with their time and things that are meaningful to them, weaving that into their essay so that we get to know the students better. The letters of reference the reference letters from teachers, I think we need to hear about the student in the academic sense. That's what we're really looking for from the teachers. We'll get to know the students otherwise as community members, often from the guidance counselors, giving us that full perspective. But the teacher recommendations help us understand them as a student in the classroom.
At least, I think if a teacher is also sometimes an advisor for a club or a coach or something like that, they sometimes, the first thing we're going to read is the academic piece. But if they can talk about issues around character or determination, you know, I've seen this. That's nice. It further strengthens it. I think that the essay, and Valerie talked about it so eloquently in terms of, you know, we're reading that person. We're trying to get to know that student. And if you think about it, your essays are the one chance you're talking to us. Everything else is somebody else is talking to us, or we're looking on a report. This is your chance to talk to us and develop that relationship.
But does it really matter where the recognition comes from as far as the teacher's concerned? I mean, I just know from experience here in other schools, humanities kids get a lot. Because it's generally one area that's always required. 4 years of no questions asked, right? So all of our kids get it. The English teachers are English teachers for a reason. They write beautifully. You know, they write well. They see lots. They have such great language. Does it really matter to you? They have to have, for example, that humanities rec, or can it come from anywhere?
I would say no. I think it should be a teacher who had to at least junior year, because again, this notion of you're really beginning, whether it's AP, advanced, or an disciplinary, to begin thinking like a college student, a potential college student. And I'd like to see when a teacher can reflect a little bit about that kind of maturity or developing maturity as an intellect. But no, I actually, my recommendation is always for students to to find the teacher who is teaching a course that's not one of your real strengths. So it's a B and everything else is an A. Well, you know, frankly, if you get the physics teacher who says, great physics student, well, he got an A, I know that, got a 750 in the subject test, so what's new? But for the English teacher where that's not your thing and can explicate a B in a way saying, this is extraordinary because, you know, easily he could get a C if he didn't really kind of put the time and effort that he did. So don't rush to the teacher who's, you know, the straight A's. Maybe there's somebody who can really explicate the grade that looks like it's a little bit of an outlier.
But likewise, if the physics is an area that you have passion about, etc., and that teacher can bring out your innovation, your creativity, in bringing out how you displayed that in the classroom and working with other students on project, then it should be that physics teacher to, again, bring it to life for us.
My name is Ashley Good, and I'm a sophomore at Glenelg, and I have a question about class rank, because I believe at Glenelg we don't publish a class rank. And I was wondering how that affects applications, especially compared to a lot of top institutions say, oh, well, we generally accept the top 10%, so you have to be in the top 10% of your school, or we don't really consider your application, or you need something really outstanding besides that to make up for that. And I was wondering, not having one, how does that impact the application?
That's a
Great question.
So what percentage of, can you quantify what percentage of your...
When I was at Vermont, we actually were quantifying this, and it's about 45% of schools were giving us a class rank, so 55%, less than half. And I don't know, my guess is, again, drawing from the Northeast, it's probably going to be a lot of the similar experiences for all of us. Often in the profile, we may get additional information about where you stand within the context of your class cohort. May get that information from the guidance counselor, from the college counselor recommendation, etc. So there are other ways that we're trying to get context of how you've performed within your class cohort.
And we also, we get fewer than 50% with a class rank. We find that most schools give us grade distributions in the profile. And so, you know, it looks like, oh, the student's getting a B+, and then we look at the grade distribution, and the average grade is a B+, or the B+ is actually on the lower end of the grade distribution. So there's a lot of forensics work that goes on in the transcript.
In the 15 minutes of it.
Yeah.
CSI Bucknell.
Yeah, there you go.
But you're not at any disadvantage by coming from a community that does not rank.
Like what we got, where
Right.
all are above average.
Okay, now no pressure, but you're the last question.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Nalin Jamils, and I'm a junior here at Glenelg Country School. And I wanted to know how or what is the importance of interviews in the college admissions process and what you expect of students in the interviews. Thank you.
Very good.
We expect students to accept the invitation for an interview. That's important. At Penn, it's our goal to interview 100% of applicants. We got pretty close last year in the 90%. The interviews happen after students submit the application, and they're conducted by alumni in students' area. So, and then interviewees or interviewers submit their reports to us, and they, they just, sometimes they add new information to the application, and that can be helpful, or they help emphasize something that you started to write about in an essay, and gives us a little more context just in that conversation. Or maybe they'll highlight, on your list of activities, something that you had on there. You spend 10 hours a week doing a certain something, but you really go into depth in your interview, so that helps us understand the meaning behind it. So interviews can be helpful to us in that way.
But I think the value of the interview will depend on the institution.
Yep.
And so at Penn, where it is so critical, and wow, that's really impressive. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Obviously, it's of great importance, and want to, try to address all the points that were made. But I have worked at the University of Maryland, and we would offer what you might call an interview, but it really was a conversation. And so, it will really depend on the institution that you're applying to.
And again, I think this is where Lee and Chris can provide you that understanding, again, of the institutions that you may be looking at in terms of how they may be looking at using it in their overall process.
And of course, you have great interview skills because you took CLK.
And a beautiful speaking voice.
Well, one thing, if you do interview, and it is actually more of a conversation, and it's not a grilling session, but what I always tell students, don't ask for the student-faculty ratio or do you have a history department. I mean, the fact is that at one time when I was applying to colleges, I need to ask that because it wasn't readily available. There was no internet. Al Gore hadn't invented the internet, right? So back to politics. But no, I think, if you're going to go in and interview, be well read about the school because the expectation is you have access to a lot of information. And so go in there ask questions that actually will move the needle for you in terms of knowledge of the school, not just simply to say, oh, I'm interested, that's why I'm here, So it really is a two-way street. So your time is very valuable. And, to just run off to do an interview but not to use it for the benefit of getting a deeper appreciation for the school is a lost opportunity.
And with that, if you will all join me and Lee in thanking our panelists for the wonderful amount of time. I don't know about you, but I'm more than impressed with, even if I've known them, I'm more than impressed now that I know them, and I feel like a better person myself from having known them. Certainly, and we know you have to go on the road, but certainly I know that Howard had a more specific question for Undergraduate. We'll be hanging around for a little bit while we're tidying up, so certainly if you have any questions, please feel free to come and engage us for a few minutes if